Okay, the next question is, how were the non-attainment boundaries determined?
So I think I got history. I think both Krishna and I have history on this, so we can go back in time a little bit. So the way EPA designates boundaries for the non-attainment area, the first one, they set a new standard and they find an area, monitor an area that's in violation, which is what occurred in the case of the state office building monitor in Fairbanks. When EPA sets the new standard, then the state goes back and it looks at all the monitors across the state to see if there's any areas that are in violation. In this case, Fairbanks was in violation. So then the state makes a recommendation to EPA on a boundary based on the information that they have, and there were 8 or 9 factors, I believe, different factors that we had to look at, everything from meteorology to emission sources, air pollution data, all sorts of different things. I think there were 8 or 9 factors that we had to analyze. And we recommended a boundary. So the department did that. I want to say that was in I can't remember what time frame that we did the initial recommendation. We sent that recommendation to EPA. The governor, the commissioner, on behalf of the governor, sent that boundary recommendation to EPA. And that was the starting point for our discussions with EPA on the boundary. Ultimately, EPA sets the boundary. So, and typically, and Krishna can speak to this for EPA, but typically what we've found is that EPA will, they're looking at all the areas across the whole country. So often they will use a jurisdictional boundary. In many places it'll be a county or multiple counties or a metropolitan statistical area. In the case of the Fairbanks area, we recommend a relatively small non-attainment boundary for a number of different reasons, which we attempted to justify and provide data to EPA on. We got a response back that suggested that the whole borough, the entire borough, be designated as non-attainment. We bent back and developed more data and more information and submitted that to EPA, and ultimately EPA made the boundary smaller to what it is today. We were able to, and basically the boundary is meant to comprise the entire area that they believe to be in violation, as well as areas that may be contributing to that. We were able to have some success in excluding the Eielson Air Force Base from the non-attainment area based on some meteorology and data that we had. But, for example, people often wonder why Goldstream Valley is included, and that was because at the time, the data we had suggested that there may be airflow from the Goldstream Valley down into the non-attainment area. So we didn't have enough data to exclude that area. But it's a very data-driven process. We had to provide a lot of information to EPA to try and justify the size of the area. But it's a negotiation, and ultimately it's EPA's decision on what the boundary actually is.
The humorous part is that we had to explain to folks back east that the Fairbanks North Shore Borough is about the size of the state of Rhode Island. So the initial starting point was, and the initial starting point for them was, well, this county and then surrounding counties around it. So if you look at the boroughs around Fairbanks, North Shore Borough, that would be the entire eastern seaboard kind of area. So we had to have that kind of discussion, and then finally we're able to whittle down to a more sensible area where we thought there is health exposure as well as it's contributing to health exposure in those communities. So yeah, it's an interesting process.
Okay, this might be a Nick question. The question is, the Dale Road area and the Nordale School area are extreme PM 2.5 hotspots in Fairbanks. Are those areas improving in air quality?
Oh, that's a really good question. And, I'd have to go back and look at some of the historical sniffer data. we have some of that we could look at to see if they're improving, and I don't know off the top of my head if they are or not improving. I do know that that particular area is identified as a hotspot, and I agree that it is a very highly polluted area. And one of the things that we do is we actively prioritize that area for the wood stove changeout program right now. But unfortunately, we don't have any specific monitoring to be able to answer that question more directly.